Welcome everyone. Today's session would be on specimen catalog. Thanks for joining in. We are going to record this session so that we can share the recording for with people who are not able to join today. Of course, we'll be sharing with all registrants. So we have muted your lines, and if you have any questions during the session, please use the chat window. Our colleagues would be able to answer, or of course, we'll also take up questions at the end of the session. Hi everyone. So I am Purnima Govindrao. I'm the product manager. So today's session is going to cover these topics all around specimen catalog, which will allow you to share data with your researchers or anyone across the institute who would like to see the data about your biosamples. We'll start off with some introduction about the feature, and we'll see different features of the catalog, how you can create multiple catalogs, who can create it, what are the configurations involved in creating catalogs, and finally, once you have configured the catalogs and published it to your researchers, how they can utilize it to handle requests. That is, they can themselves put in requests for samples, and you as a biobank manager or a request manager, how you can process those requests. So we'll see the whole life cycle of this end-to-end workflow of request to processing the request. So to start off with the introduction, as you all know, specimen catalog is mainly intended to enable sharing data for your researcher, which will result in better utilization of your samples. So right now, in most cases, the researchers have to call the biobank and ask for specific specimens, either offline through emails or through phone calls, which is difficult to manage in the end. So all these can be managed within Open Specimen, where first of all, you can share your data, and someone who has access or catalog privileges can process the request as such. So now we'll look at the features of the catalog. To start with, how to control who can create catalog and how to control who can see catalogs or access catalogs. So in terms of creation, of course, super admin and institute admin, they are highest role. So they will be able to create catalogs. But in addition, recently we have added as part of the roles, there is a separate privilege now for catalogs. So if you see, for example, if you open administrator role, you see that there is now a separate catalog privilege or resource on which you can provide permissions, like who can access a catalog to read and create and update and so on. So this is how you can control specifically, to start with, who can create a catalog. Yeah, other than super admin, if you want someone else, like if you want specific groups to create their own catalog to share with their own researchers, you can give this. Or if you don't want certain users to be able to create their own catalogs, you can remove these privileges as such. Yeah, so that is the catalog privileges. That is, who to start with, this is what you would need to configure if you want non-super admins to create catalog. Now, going into the catalog configurations, who all what are all the things involved in catalog configuration? So this is like, when you decide to create a catalog, what are the prerequisites, what you need to think about when you start configuring a catalog? First and foremost, what you need to decide is what data you want to show as part of the catalog. So I'll be going into more detail about different types of catalog, that is public versus private. But at high level, there are two different types of catalogs. So you can publicize your specimen data. Sorry. You can publicize your specimen data even without login, and if you want, you can make the catalog accessible with login, that is private login. So based on that, you can decide what data you want to publish. Uh, to give you an idea, in most centers who are using catalog, in the public catalog, you don't want to, display sensitive information. So it would be more like just summary data that you want to publish. So public catalogs can be used to display maybe summary data about your biobank or specific research groups. Whereas private catalogs, if you're giving it to accessible to specific researchers, then you can make it accessible to PIs and coordinators of that specific study. Then you can think about maybe displaying more data so that the researcher has access to it. So that's the first thing to decide when you try to design a catalog, as to what you want to display in as part of the catalog, what specimens to display, and what data about the specimens to display is what you want to decide. The next part of the catalog configuration is every catalog has a dashboard. So I'll also be in parallel showing some of the catalogs that we have created. So let me go inside a catalog. So when you access a catalog, you have an option to first display just a summary data like this using different visually appealing graphs or just the counters as you see here. And this is an optional thing. So when I go into configuration, I'll show you that if you don't want a dashboard, you can skip this part as well. But this is if you don't hide the dashboard, this is the first thing that the researchers will see when they access the catalog. So this is again, you need to configure different graphs using the queries module, and that graphs can be attached to individual catalog. So now you have to, the second thing you need to decide in catalog configuration is, first, whether you want a dashboard to be displayed. Second, what are all the different graphs or dashlets, what we call, that should be part of the catalog. So that is the second thing. And third is the request form. So when you give access to a researcher to your catalog, now they're interested in some specimens, so they want to request it, but you want them to provide more details, like which study are they requesting these samples for, and where should you ship the samples, so shipping address and things like that. So every biobank might have a different request form when users request for samples. So every catalog can have a different request form. So these are the three main things. There are many other configurations which I'll go into deeper, but these are the three main things. When you start catalog configuration, you need to think about these three things, and we'll show you more about how to design these. But these are the things that you need to set up as prerequisites. Yeah. And going to next part of the features, you can have multiple catalogs. So generally what happens is, if you're using open specimen at university level or enterprise level, there are different user groups or research groups using open specimen. So imagine universities like Washington University in St. Louis, they are using open specimen at a very large scale. And they're using it for different research groups, maybe like Alzheimer research, lung cancer research, or in general cancer, oncology research, and so on. So now creating one big catalog with all this data might not be much of use, because the researcher might be looking for specific data. So one option is you can have catalogs specific to research groups, and how this can be controlled is the through query. So every catalog is attached to a query, and that query can decide what data should be published as part of the catalog. So so every catalog that way can display different set of data. And if I just show you our demo site, so this is our public demo site, and we have created multiple catalogs, as you see, for different demos. There is something for sepsis studies, the bacterial strains catalog. Someone wanted to do research on animals, so there is a different catalog for that. There is specific study catalogs for each individual institutes. So this way you can have multiple catalogs. And when you go inside the catalog, So you see that once you create a catalog, every catalog gets a unique URL. So now this URL can be shared with the researchers who needs to access this catalog, and so that they don't have to remember to go to a specific URL and then go to a specific catalog. So instead of that, you can directly give access to a catalog URL. And also you can, of course, with help of your IT, make this catalog URL more user friendly and make it shorter, and so that you can just redirect to that URL. So that is how you can have multiple catalogs, and each catalog can either be at system level. That means it can be having data across studies, or if you have study specific catalog, you can also attach it to individual study or protocol. Yeah, so that's about multiple catalogs. So the use of multiple catalog basically is you will be able to have different data sets as part of each catalog. Each catalog can have different configurations, different request forms, different request managers. Based on for whom that data is targeted, you can have different type of catalogs. As I said, each catalog can have different dashboards, and that is configured through. So here, if I go back to my catalog configuration, these are basic details about the catalog, and this is where you can configure the dashboard. So each dashboard can have different dashlets. So let me also open a dashboard here. So if you see here, these are all what we call as metrics or counters. These are all graphs, and all these are created using our queries module. So the first step is to create these graphs separately using the query module, and then you attach that as part of this catalog. So if you see here, these are some of the ones that are attached to this particular catalog. Yeah. So, and if you don't want a dashboard to be displayed, you see that there is a configuration within the catalog. So here you have this, whether you want to show a dashboard or not for this specific catalog. So every catalog, as I said, can have its own configuration. So this particular the catalog, if you don't want dashboard to be displayed, you can say no. In that case, what would happen is when you access the catalog, it will directly go to this page. So this is the page where researchers can filter out specimens and look for specimens of interest. So so you have a choice whether you want your researchers to first see a dashboard with different graphs to just know the summary of your biobank, and then come to this page where they go into details about the specimen, or directly come to this page. This is what this particular configuration will decide. Yeah, that's about dashboard. And then you can configure different filters that the researchers can use. So some of you might have used our queries module. There you have to create queries from scratch, right? So you'll have to add filters, you have to then look for the specimens and so on. But whereas in a catalog, when researcher access a catalog, this is a simplified version of the query module, because the filters are predefined. So if you see here, this particular catalog, as a researcher, even though Open Specimen has hundreds of fields across participant, visit, specimen, custom forms, as part of the catalog, I can add filters only using these specific filters. That is because in my catalog, if you see, I have configured something called as a search query. So this query will decide what should be the filters that the researchers can use when they're using the catalog. Yeah. So now if I go inside the catalog configuration, so sorry, I'm switching between two screens just to clarify. This screen is the administrative part of the catalog where I'm configuring the catalog, and this screen is how it will look like after I configured. So what I'm talking about right now is this search query, which will decide multiple things. One is what filters they can access. So let me now go inside that query. So this is configured using the queries module. And if you see, when you're creating filters using queries module, you have so many different fields, from open specimen data model, custom form. So this gets confusing if researcher has to look through these fields, right? But what you can do is, out of these fields, what is important for the researchers to look for specimens of interest, those filters you can make it as parameterized in your search query. So if you see, so when you create a search query for your catalog, the filters that you select, this filter, that parameterized filter, those are the only filters that will appear in your catalog like this. So you create a saved query, which will be used as part of the catalog. And inside the saved query, you create filters and make them as parameterized. That is when it will appear like this. Yeah. So now if you see, this particular saved query has many parameterized filters. Some of them do not have parameterized. What this means is, it will restrict the specimen data based on this condition. So suppose you want to show only collected specimens, you want to show only aliquots, you want to show only specimens that are available, so you can add availability status condition. So those conditions will not appear for the researchers, but it will restrict what specimens you want to publish. Another use case is, as part of the catalogs, sometimes you want to hide few specimens. There might be very important or unique specimens which you don't want to publish as part of the catalog. Then you can add some conditions to filter out them from your catalog. So all those are controlled using this search query, that is your catalog search query. So that is the first part of it. I'm again going to open the catalog configuration here. Yeah. So here, that this is the first part. So if you remember, in our prerequisites, the first thing that you need to decide was what data you want to publish and what filters you want to publish as part of your catalog. And that is controlled through this search query, or a saved query will control what filters you want to show as part of the catalog. The second part is, after you have created the filters, you go to view records, and the columns that you select as part of this search query using this actions and column in the saved query, only these columns are visible to the researcher. So similar to how the filters are restricted, now in the catalog, suppose I, as a researcher, I say, okay, I'm interested in female gender patients of a specific race. Let me first go to the table view. So here, if you see, out of hundreds of fields of open specimen, for the researcher, I'm only showing very few fields, right? So hardly some 10 or 12 fields. So these fields again are configured using that search query. This query that you configure in the catalog, you go to the results view and pick and choose what columns you want to show to the researchers. Again, you don't want to show things like participant name, MRN. These are all sensitive information. You don't want to maybe publish to your researchers. So those can be hidden using this configuration. That is the search query configuration results view. So that is what will decide what columns to be displayed over here. The other thing to notice, in this particular catalog, every row is a single specimen. Sometimes you do not want that. You want to just display count of specimens based on different properties. Even that is possible using the search query. So what you need to do is, you go here, and suppose I have selected, say, specimen identifier I've selected. So here, instead of showing every specimen, what I'll say is only show me count of specimens. So that is also possible. And so what I'm trying to say is, again, all this is your decision, whether you want to show individual specimens in your catalog or just show count information. And all this is controlled using the search query that you define in your, as part of the catalog. So that is this part. So now, going back to what we were discussing here. So we saw how you can configure the filters and you can configure the columns in the catalog. So both of this can be controlled using the search query. So the next part is when you're configuring catalog, you can also configure request managers. So these are the people who would be processing all the requests that come in from the catalog. So these are the people who can approve requests, reject requests, and then process requests. And these are the people also who will get notified whenever there is a request from this catalog. So when a researcher submits a request through a catalog, these are the people who get notified and they can process the request. So that is the request managers. You also have an option to display the data in card view versus list view as part of the catalog. And let me show you how it will look like. So this is the general list view. So where each data is shown as a grid or a table. And if I go back to the card view, so every specimen here is shown as a card, more readable. And you can see more data about the specimen from here. It is view details, or if you want to add to cart and request, you can do it from here. So, and this card view, what columns to display, how the each card should be displayed is controlled using this particular configuration. So, but if you don't configure this, by default, it will always display as a table view or a grid view. So this is not a mandatory thing. If you want to make it look visually appealing, and if you want to look it like if you want catalog to look like this as card view, that's only when you need that configuration. Otherwise, by default, if you don't configure that, it will always display like the query results, which is the table view. Yeah. So now we'll go into more deeper about how you can configure different multiple catalogs, and what you need to decide when you configure catalogs, whether it should be a public catalog or a private catalog. So to start with, what is public catalog and why you need that? So public catalogs can be accessed without login, and this is generally useful if you don't want to create, if you want to make your data accessible to larger public, larger set of researchers, maybe outside your institute, and you don't want to create every user account who wants to access open specimen and then access the catalog. Then you can create public catalog, and as I said, you can control what data you want to display. So you can just display very minimal information just so that the researcher gets an idea about what kind of data you have. And then if they're interested and if they want to see more data, maybe then you can give them a login, and you can give access to a private catalog which has more information. So that's an option you have. So how to make a catalog public or private? When you're creating catalog, there is a configuration which says whether it requires login or not. So this will decide whether it is a public catalog. So right now on our demo site, this particular catalog is the public catalog. So if you see requires login is no. And this would make sure that even without login, so I'm just going to open that in another incognito mode. So as soon as I access the URL, I'll be able to access the public catalog. Of course, as I said, you can even give access to directly the catalog URL, or a particular website URL, which will directly take to a default catalog, which can be accessed like this. So now as a researcher, I didn't log in, but I can still see some summary data. I can still see view catalog and apply filters and see some specimens of interest. So this is what is the public catalog. So let me go here. So now in public catalog, since you have not given them login, you don't want certain buttons to be displayed, right? So here, if I go back to my catalog, sorry, let me go back to my public catalog over here. So if you see here, I see buttons like sign in or sign up and things like that, the info, that is the version of the software. So you don't want researchers to be confused with lot of buttons. and they just have to get access to catalog, then you can give them access to the public catalog, and also give them access to a specific catalog without the app button. So this is what this will do. If you don't want the sign in buttons and everything to be displayed, then you can make this as no, then those sign in buttons can be hidden. So that is what it is. Now we'll go into private catalog. So private catalog again can be used for multiple purposes. One is how to do it. You just say request login yes, and when you give access to such catalog, and when you give them the URL, it will first ask them to log in, then only they'll be able to access the catalog. And again, this might be private data specific to researchers and so on. Now, to access a private catalog, there are certain other things you need to take care of. One is the user should have access to that data. So if the private catalog belongs to, say, lung cancer study, then the user should have access to that data, then only they'll be able to access the catalog and its specimens. And they need to have at least catalog read access. So the role that you have assigned to that user should have at least catalog read access, so that they'll be able to view the catalog and access the catalog. So these permissions are required, and you also need to give access to the data of that catalog, uh, uh, maybe just read access and so on. Yeah. So that is how you give access to private catalog. So and that private catalog can also be made as protocol specific catalog. So once you create a catalog, and if it is specific to a particular protocol data, then what you can do is go inside the protocol. So this is a specific protocol, and in settings you have option to define a catalog. So if you see, I have assigned a catalog to this study or protocol. So what this will do is this will attach the catalog. If you see, there's a view catalog button only for this protocol but not the others. That's because I have configured within this protocol a particular catalog. So this is, you're tying a private catalog to a particular protocol. So that is what this is. This is the CP specific catalog I was talking about. So as you see, the catalog levels, you can create public catalog, and public catalog generally is to display at high level what kind of data you have and some kind of summary information. And some of our customers have used the public catalog URL and published inside their biobank website. So if you go to their biobank website, you can directly access the catalog. So that is one more use of it. So in your biobank website, you can say to access specimens, you use this link to look at the summary data, and that will directly take to the catalog. And of course, if you want to make the URL public, that is outside your network, all that needs to be taken care of by your IT. But in general, without login is what the public catalog means. Now, so all that is configured. So let me go back to the catalog here and just give you an overview of what we saw till now. So when you're configuring catalog, you give a title, description, search query. This is the saved query, which will decide the filters and what columns to display, what specimens to display. All this is controlled by the specimen catalog. Search result columns is what will be displayed for the request managers when they are processing the request, as well as the attachment that goes as part of the email notification. Search items HTML, as I said, if you want the card view, you can use this configuration. The request form, this, let me show you this as the next part. So now as a researcher, I added a few specimens, and I'm interested in these specimens. So what I'll do is I'll view more details, and okay, I'm interested in this. I'll select these specimens. So as a researcher now, I'm looking at these specimens and adding to cart. And from the cart, I review the cart and confirm the request. Yeah. So this is where the request form comes into picture. And here is where the requester will give more details about, why they need these specimens, maybe what kind of project are they working on, maybe any mandatory documents that they need to submit when they request samples. This request form is again dependent on what is your biobank or repository requirement. Every catalog can have a different form, and this form is designed using our forms module. So if I go back here, so you design a form using our forms module. So for new users, this forms module allows users to create additional fields which is not in open specimen, and that will include, let me just show you the request. Yeah. So in our demo side, there is some request form. So if you see here, you can design such request forms, and you can add any type of field that you want that to the request form. And these forms are attached to individual um, catalogs, so that when a researcher requests, so these are the fields that they need to fill in when they request for specimens. That is the request form. Request managers, as I said, these are the users who will approve a request, reject a request, or process the request. Requires login, whether it's a private or public login, public catalog, whether you want to show a dashboard or directly go to a catalog. And finally, for public catalogs, do you want the app buttons to be displayed or not? So that these are the different configurations that are part of the catalog. Now, once you've configured the catalog, so how do you manage the requests? Yeah. So we saw how researchers can add specimens to a cart and submit a request. And when a request is submitted, the request managers are notified so that they can, approve or reject requests. So let me also show you, to go to a catalog and show you the view requests. So as request managers, they'll be able to see all the requests that have come in till now, and each request has different status. So when a first request is submitted, it is in pending status. And this is how it will look like when I access it. You'll see all the details that the researcher has filled in as part of the catalog form or the request form. Now, and you can also see what specimens were requested as part of the request. So if you see here, the columns that they see as the request manager is defined again in the catalog. So if I go back to my catalog, so this specimen query, this is what it will, this will decide what columns to display for the request manager. So just to clarify, the columns that you display to the researchers when they request versus the columns that is shown to the request manager can be different. Because, as a request manager, I want to see more details so that I can process this request. And that is all configured within the catalog using either the same query or the two different saved queries. So this is how a request is shown to the request manager. So if you see here, I can either approve or reject. So the first step is the request is submitted by the researcher. Now the second step, once you get notified, you can log in and review the request. You can approve or reject the request. So now if I say approve, I can put some comments. Yeah, so request will be something. And in addition to the requester, if you want to notify any other users, you can notify them as well, and then you approve it. Now, if I go back to my catalog, you see both of them are approved status. Now I can go here and I can process the request. So here, if you see, I can see more details about the specimen. Oops, sorry. And then process the request as such. So now if I also show you a better request dashboard. So if you see here, this is a better one because it has more requests. You can see there are different status that is indicated for each of the requests. So it starts with pending, it either is approved or rejected, then it is processed. So once it is processed, you can see that the specimens where some of them were distributed, some of them you didn't want to distribute, so it's still in pending. But you also have a choice if you want. You can also see the orders that are associated with that particular request. So that is the third step. So first is you approve or reject, then you pass it on to your technician so that they can distribute the specimens and close that particular request. Yeah. So that is how you can track different status of each request, and you can see here there are different status here. And if you don't want, you can reject it, you can download a report about a request and so on. So this is, as you see, the whole process can be tracked. So in most biobanks right now this is offline, and all this can be done within open specimen. As I said, at each step of this request, there are email notifications. When you submit a request, when the researcher submits a request, email like this is sent, where the request managers can view the request and process the request. And there are other notifications like whenever you approve it, reject it, the requester gets notified as such. So this is at high level the different features of catalog. And in the recent past we have been adding a lot of new features, especially because there is more interest and people have started using the catalog more extensively. We have been working with one new client, which is National University Hospital in Singapore, and they're using open specimen exclusively for catalog. So they are loading data from different biobanks in Singapore, from different databases into open specimen using bulk import, and they're publishing, they plan to publish like a nationwide catalog data. Right now they're working with a couple of biobanks. So they asked for a few features which we have recently developed. One of them is when we are in the catalog. So let me go back to one of the catalog here. Yeah, so this is the catalog, as I said. And as I said, the first, when you access the catalog, you have an option to show the dashboard. So the second part is view catalog. And here, when I as a requester select certain conditions, so these are the details about the specimen. As I said, these columns are configured using the query. Now, if I want to see more details about each of these specimen, this is where I can see it. I can see view more details, and I can see for each specimen. So this is done because they collect lot of clinical data. So they want to publish that as part of the catalog, and they didn't want to crowd this particular view with lot of columns and confuse the user. So this is one way to see more details about the specimen. So this is a new feature. You can configure this view, and you can add more columns as part of this view details. So this is the view details part. And in addition to how you can configure the results view, the researchers also can configure the results view. So if I go back to the results view over here, so the columns that you have configured, if they don't want to see certain columns, they can unselect this. Suppose again, this is a demo catalog, so it has very few information. But imagine a catalog where they are publishing a lot of clinical data. So there might be almost 25 50 fields, and you don't want to crowd the interface with all the fields. So what you can do is, in your query you configure all the 50 fields, but the default view you just show a very minimal data, maybe 10 fields or 15 fields, and then the requester can add more fields as per their interest. So suppose they are doing lung cancer research, then they'll include smoking history. but someone who's doing breast cancer, maybe they're interested in family history, so they're not interested in smoking history. Just an example, of course, they might be interested. But so as admin, you include all the fields which will appear here, so that now as a researcher, when I am looking for specimens, I have a choice of including or excluding the columns. And that is all controlled using the catalog. So the superset of the columns is configured using this search query, and the default columns can be configured using this columns over here. Suppose I say by default only show few fields like this, and what will happen? This search query might have 50 fields, but now when the researcher first adds the filter, they'll only see 4 fields. But now to include other fields, they can use this columns and include the other fields. So this will give them more flexibility, and it is easier for them to handle the data. So again, this was done recently for NUH. The other new enhancement we did recently was assigning to user groups. So here, if you see, when you're assigning a catalog to user group, so by default, this user group is optional. So if you don't assign it to any user group, by default, it is accessible to all users. Of course, the data accessible or not is dependent on whether it's private or public. If it's private, whether they have access to that protocol's data. But if you assign it to specific user group, for example, this particular catalog, EL catalog, is only assigned to EL group. That means that the users who are part of this AL group is only able to access this catalog. No one else can access this catalog. So this is more a restricted catalog that you can do. And again, this was done for a specific client where within a protocol, they have different user groups and they want to bifurcate the data and give restricted access. So you can this way give it to specific user groups. In the previous version, for the request managers to process the request, they only had option to go inside the protocol and process the request. They did not have access to the catalogs menu item. That is, non-super admins, there was no way to access the catalogs module. So that's the reason we have added now in the roles a separate privilege. If they have access to read, they'll be able to access this catalog menu, and they can then access the request and process the request if they have access to process the request. Yeah, so that is another option that we recently added. Yeah, and so finally, other than what we have been seeing till now is specimen related catalogs, right? So some in recently people have asked for non-specimen based catalogs. What I mean is, suppose they want just to publish what kind of studies are going on in their biobank, or maybe very high level summary data. This might be useful for the public catalog, where you give very high level summary data. So even those things are possible, and of course if such things are, if there are some things that are not possible, and if you're looking for such things, you can contact us if you need some specific enhancements. So these were the features as such. Any questions before I move on to the final slide about what resources you can access to learn about catalogs?
It's Richard from Oxford. First question, how much of what you've shown is specific to version 9 and how much predates version 9 Open Specimen?
Yeah, sure. So the last few slides I showed, that is the new features. So these are part of mostly 8.2 and above. But the main features about creating a specimen query to handle the filters and controlling what data to do that, and request managers, those are all old features which are even available before 8.2. Only the new features that the last few slides that I showed, those are part of 8.2 and above.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that answers that.
Yeah. I see one more. Sorry, was there another question, Richard?
No, it's my colleague Stephanie. Is probably asking something very similar to what I would have asked.
Yeah. So the question is, how do you define which catalog a set of sample will appear in? Is it based on who entered the data for the specimen, or is it the field that needs to be included in the sample registration acquisition? So what set of samples should appear in a particular catalog is defined. Let me just go back to the catalog configuration. Is defined using this search query. Yeah, so now inside this search query, I can include any conditions that will decide what specimens that are displayed as part of the catalog. So now imagine you want to only display plasma aliquots as part of this catalog. Then you would add that condition specifically. Say here, suppose I have right now said all types of specimens, but now if I say only plasma, then this will make sure that, oh, sorry, I'm putting it in restriction. Yeah, so this will make sure that this catalog will only display plasma aliquot. So, or I mean, this is just an example of such condition, but this is what will decide what specimens will be part of the catalog. Does it answer your question?
Partly. So I'm thinking of, in our biobank, we have people collecting generically, and then we have people collecting specifically for a project that they are doing. And I can imagine them not necessarily wanting those to be available in one single whole biobank catalog. So how would I make the catalog for, say her name is Sue, how would I make all the samples that Sue collected in one catalog, but it's not necessarily just Sue that collects or enters the data?
Yeah, so then you'll have to add that condition specifically. So there are two ways to handle this. You mentioned about there are specimens collected under specific protocols and you don't want them to appear in the catalog. So one way to do it is you say the protocol title, not one-off, and you can say specific studies. Say, for example, I include these studies so that it will, exclude all the specimens from these specific protocols. The other example you gave was specifically collected by a specific user or maybe by a particular researcher. Then you can again add that as a condition. You can say collector user is, certain user. So that way in this catalog, so the bottom line is everything what you need to display in the catalog is configured using the saved query that is attached to the catalog. So you can apply conditions to restrict what specimens to display, and that condition can be across any field in open specimen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so finally, we do have online resources for the catalog. We have created manuals. We have created, of course, there is a video, but it's a bit outdated. We plan to update that with the new features that I was talking about. But still, it will give you an idea about what are the features of catalog. So if you see, for the new users, this is our public help manual, where we have data across the manual or user manual across all features and modules. And one of them is the specimen catalog. As you see, it covers every feature, that is how to configure it, as well as how the process of request and processing request works. So there is detailed notes and manual about it. So that's it on today's webinar. Thanks everyone for joining. So we'll be sharing the recording. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I just remembered I did have another question. It was about the approval stroke rejecting requests.
Mm-hmm.
Is there facility within the rejection to actually add a note or something as to the reason why?
Yes, yes. So when you approve or reject, you can add a reason, and when the requester gets notified, they'll see why it got rejected.
Yeah. Does the requester have to have a Open Specimen login?
No, no. If it's a public,
yeah,
if it is a public catalog, in the request form, email ID would be asked, and if, based on that email ID, the notification would be sent.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, so if you see this is a pending request, and when I reject, I can put rejection comments, and I can notify additional users, but by default, the requester will get notified. And if you see there is a field for requested email ID, and it will go to that email. So there is one question: can the specimens that are shown in the catalog also be edited by the users? No, not from the catalog. And the specimens that are displayed in the catalog can only be requested. It cannot be edited as such. Is the use of catalog feature available in all levels of? Yeah.
Purnima, I think Leo's question is more about if the specimen is displayed in the catalog, can some other user, valid user in Open Specimen, like a technician or someone, can go and edit those specimens? So are they locked for edit because it's on the catalog?
Okay, okay. If that is the question, no, there is no such restriction. So you can edit specimens, and that the edited information would be displayed, because catalog data is coming from query. So it is always the latest data that is displayed. Of course, if you want to reserve specimens for specific researcher and publish it on the catalog for specific researcher, then there is a reserve feature, and when you reserve a specimen, you usually cannot do anything with that specimen unless it's distributed. Yeah.
The only addition that I would do there is, suppose the specimens are displayed on the catalog, and in the meanwhile you went and distributed it to some other researcher or utilized it for some processing, etc., then it would automatically kind of get deleted from the catalog, because again, as Purnima said, the catalog is always showing the live data. So if some specimen is not available anymore, etc., then it won't be displayed in the catalog the next time when you refresh the catalog or see the catalog.
So the other question is use of specimen catalog feature available in all levels of access to Open Specimen? This is available only in the enterprise version, not in the community edition, if that is what you meant.
Yeah, but it is part of the enterprise edition, so it's not a paid plugin. I mean, it's inbuilt in the enterprise edition. So anyone who has enterprise edition also has specimen catalog automatically.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thanks everyone again for joining in. We'll share the recording with everyone. Of course, if you have any additional questions, you can either email us at support@krishagni.com, or you can post on the forums. So we do have forums, open forums, for people who are not aware. We highly recommend that you subscribe to forums.openspecimen.org, where you can post your questions, and we also keep posting about different new features and so on. Okay, thanks everyone.